President Poroshenko actually plans up to 60 reforms during his administration, and actually seems like deregulation is the word that your administration uses the most when you try to describe all those reforms. Is it true, and is it really so important for your administration?
I think that, first of all, thank you for having me here. I think that the key element of the transformation for Ukraine is about not only deregulation, but the first is rule of law. The rule of law needs to prevail in the country, and it's comprised of three key reforms that needs to take place. One, it's anti-corruption, and it's, there is a set of things that has to happen. Second, it's court reform, juridical reform. And we need to make sure that it's taking place. And the third one is the reform of the Ministry of Interior and everything related to this area. We need to bring the rule of law as number one. The second element is deregulation. Deregulation is critical for economic development, because deregulation is something that removes the obstacles for the businesses to flourish, investments to come, as well as remove a lot of areas where corruption is taking place.
But don't you fear that actually deregulation is that the reason why the whole, a lot of analysts say it's oligarch regime, in Ukraine thriving because of deregulation, because of lack of pursuing the law, because of lack of enthusiasm among Ukrainian government officials to pursue the law, and to actually a lot of lobby groups inside the previous parliament and a lot of previous parliaments, they were working on how to dismantle this complex structure of regulations that it dates back to the Soviet Union.
Well, you're absolutely right that over time, the regulation been built and piled and then regulated over the regulation. When we worked with the NGO Easy Business in Ukraine, they analyzed almost 800 different regulation acts. And when we went down and split it up, which can be done and should be implemented as soon as possible, it's 173. And then we start looking into what can be done with this. And there is a working group going on through one by one. And each regulation has something that has some corruption element, some hidden things, some unjustified regulation. And in order to minimize that, we have to, or not minimize, we need to eliminate that. We need to introduce certain laws and certain decrees of the Cabinet of Ministers. But in order to introduce the laws, we needed new Verkhovna Rada. And right now we have a new Verkhovna Rada. I hope it's going to come soon. And that's, I think, the key importance, that the new Rada forms the key coalition, the new coalition that will unite politicians into very concrete steps, what has to be implemented. The same way the majority of European countries are doing the coalition agreements, with a very detailed plan outline for coalition, for politicians, both within the Rada and those who will be elected or nominated to be in the government. So with a very, very concrete steps, which needs to happen within the regulation, within different reforms area.
Oliver, do you have any questions? I suppose the question is, Ukraine is not alone across the post-Soviet space in having a system of selective justice, reform, law enforcement. A sort of switch-on, switch-off system, and the people who are in charge of the switch are the people with power. I suppose my question is, what is the president doing to ensure that the reform process doesn't turn into a clan-on-clan war?
Like it did before on many occasions.
First, transparency. Let me outline what we established. The president established National Reform Council. In National Reform Council, we have president, Prime Minister, members of the Parliament, National Bank of Ukraine, and whole Cabinet of Ministers, sitting in the one board and making decisions on the key reforms. Then under it, we established Executive Committee, which has 2 people from the President, 2 people from the Cabinet of Ministers, 2 people from the Parliament, and 1 person from National Bank. This is executive team which meets every week. and tracks what's the process, how the process on each reform is taking place.
But how the opposition will be present in
Through Rada, through Verkhovna Rada, they can be nominated. We will be asking Rada to nominate people. Then when we go into the development process, then there is a project management office which will help to coordinate different working groups that exist in different ministries and institutions. As it now, we help with the project management office to coordinate things. What is the number one importance is that any working group, let's pick the civil service reform. This working group developed laws and some procedures, the latest law. They must, and we make sure that that happens, engage the civil society, expert. All their work needs to be public. So there is a public involvement and public ability to trace any reform on the site Reforms in UA, which we are currently trying to establish and build, so that any idea and any decision can be traceable, any development, any thoughts be there online, anything that's important for the country can be open to anybody in Ukraine and outside Ukraine.
Okay, but deregulation, right? It also means drastic cuts in government spending and the size. And actually, the latter is the size of 23% of GDP, and some people say that cuts also needed in energy subsidies, that amount of 10% of GDP, which is kind of really huge, and also reducing senior public servants' retirement benefits, and they're equal to 4% of GDP. And all those things are predictably unpopular among the public, especially when it comes to energy subsidies or a lot of government workers like teachers and medical workers. How you plan to sell that kind of unpopular reforms, and how you plan to find the needed support in the parliament for that? Because let's be frank, all those parties that made to the parliament, all their programs are quite populist in a way that, for example, a lot of them promise to expand government, not to cut it.
Let me, the way we see through coalition agreement. The bloc, Petro Poroshenko bloc, come out with a proposal for the coalition agreement. If you look at the structure of the agreement, it's structured actually based on the UK or Germany one, which has the definition why it exists, the probably 20% describing how their coalition needs to be organized, but 80% is actually very detailed list of actions within the reforms.
And you have the list of reforms.
No, it's
there.
online.
Yeah,
and it's online, so anybody can go in and look. And we already received feedback from European Business Association. We received feedback from. We're waiting for American Chamber of Commerce. We received feedback from consulting companies, PwC, Ernst & Young. We're receiving the feedback from different experts. There is a reanimation package of reform. So people looked at the proposal of reforms and they would like to see very clear steps to be done. Actually, everything you just listed is in this coalition agreement. Very unpopular things, but somebody has to do it. Ukraine is in the state where we have to start executing things. Stop talking, start executing. And in order to, how you can commit, and this is actually the European practice, when you create a coalition agreement, within the coalition agreement, you describe which coalition is agreed on. Reform A, anti-corruption, set of actions. Court reform, set of actions. Deregulation, set of actions. Transport reform, set of action. Privatization, decentralization, set of actions. It's a serious work where everything is described, what has to happen. And then coalition votes for that in the parliament, and coalition government executes this plan. This is very important milestone for the democratic country. We can't run a coalition and the country with a 3-page document. It has to be very concrete and very clear what to be done.
But wait, the document that you're talking about is President Poroshenko's document, the bloc of Petro Poroshenko's document. And through the whole week, we've been seeing those reports about People's Front, the prime minister party that did so well in these elections. They're putting out their document, with their kind of version of coalition, how they see it.
It came first in the popular vote, of course.
Yes, it's true. And actually, do you think that it's kind of problematic now to combine those documents or to decide what kind of documents we should follow? The Petro Poroshenko's documents, Yatsenyuk document, and Samopomish, for example, the third party that they did so well, and they could also put some their documents, and they're very crucial for a coalition.
I think the role of the coalition discussion is to have discussion and pick in things that has to be in the document. I find it very strange when one document says reform of energy, that's it. And I see another document that says reform of energy, A, B, C, D, with very concrete steps. That's two different approaches. One is very concrete, which is traceable and understandable for everybody who is behind that. Another one, reform of energy can be mean, without description, sell everything to Russia. That could be as well. That's another option. And when people go into the coalition, I'm joking, of course, but when we go into coalition agreement, anybody who goes into coalition, any agreement, they need to understand what they're signing up for. And I believe that Samopomish will also have a detailed kind of things that has to be done. And this is a task list. That's what people expect. Maybe some of this is not popular. Something might not be popular. That's understandable. But unfortunately, country for 23 years been in the in dire straits, and downhill of creating a very ugly legal system, very ugly things. We need to reform all that.
Is that an issue right now in coalition talks, reforms, or just the trade of?
I believe that there is a general understanding that it's important to have description, what has to be done, and not very general, but actually very specific. And I see that the dialogue is taking place. We'll see how it evolves over the next couple of weeks. But it's as if, again, we need to aspire and learn from the examples that exist in Europe.
What are the hardest part at this point proceeding with the coalition talks, because they're still ongoing?
Well, I can't bring this in because I'm not involved in details. I'm helping to coordinate teams in the bloc related to reforms as a head of the executive committee for reforms, because we engaged a lot of people who submitted a lot of ideas to us. We have a lot of materials already prepared by experts, and we want to share, and we're sharing this with political parties, so that political parties can see what experts are saying. For example, if we have to reform Naftogaz, what are the steps need to take place? If we're talking about reform of Ukrainian railways, what are the steps? And what has to be? Do we agree to have it in coalition agreement as a commitment of the government and the parliament or not? Do they agree to abolish common social tax to 23% as President Poroshenko bloc is proposing? I think that all this is a subject of negotiations of multiple parties who will join the coalition team.
And I think the last question I want to ask about the deadline. Do you have any deadline for coalition talks? Because, we had the first deadline right after the election. It was next week, precisely 10 days. Right now, it seems like it could take more than 10 days. Nobody's surprised. It's Ukraine politics. But do you have an internal deadline for coalition talks?
It's a fantastic question because I was looking because I looked into this subject in a lot of areas. There is a fantastic research done by actually for UK, and the span of coalition formation in the European Union range from few days to actually several, almost 60, 80 days in some countries. I think that, and I hope that political parties will find compromises on some of the topics for reforms but they will still focus on the results that has to be delivered, because the country currently needs support. Country needs revival. Country needs action. And I hope that there will be no political jeopardy and personal positioning versus the country, which we all aspire to change, which we all aspire to prosper and join European Union, hopefully into 2020.
Thanks a lot. It was Dmytro Shymkiv, Deputy Chief of Staff of the Presidential Administration. Thanks a lot.